Mike Barnacle, the story I'm talking about back in 2005 revealed all the allies that were helping us out in our effort to get information from al-Qaeda terrorists. I mean, again, it offended me, but I would not have expected the Bush administration to seize all of their records. I mean, it's just not usually done.
Nor is it usually done when you have the Attorney General of the United States using the phrase, as you just indicated, this put American lives at risk. Lisa, what we do know about the Associated Press story thus far is that national security was involved. We understand that the Attorney General says lives were potentially at risk. American lives were at risk. But we also know that the Associated Press held the story at the request of the administration. And the administration seems to be putting a lot of effort into keeping a good distance from the IRS story and the AP story from encroaching into the Oval Office. Do we know whether or not the President of the United States knew about this massive electronic blanket, 100 reporters involved, telephones being tapped by the government? Do we know when he was told or when he found out about this?
Well, my hunch is that he probably did not know. If this decision truly was made by the U.S. Attorney and those directly involved in the case, and if the Attorney General had in fact recused himself, it would appear that the President did not know. Another thing to keep in mind is
but Lisa, let me stop you right there. Did Eric Holder, he said he recused himself, but Eric Holder hasn't come out and said that he, as the Attorney General, wasn't aware of this, has he?
No, he's not said that specifically. But look at this from a political standpoint. You had Benghazi, which the right was up in arms about. Then comes the IRS, which offended the right, the middle, and even some Democrats and members of the press. But when they did this, they turned one of the president's most important constituencies, the press and the left, against him. So politically, it's hard to imagine, and this is a very calculating White House, it's hard to imagine that they would have green-lighted this kind of thing. I think it's more likely that this was something that was handled within the Justice Department, and that if the White House was notified, it was after the fact and not before the action was taken.
Kelly,
well, and of course, Mike Barnacle, that's going to be the question is, so even if the Attorney General and the President of the United States did in fact sign off on the decision, I would be shocked if the Attorney General didn't know after the decision was being made that the Associated Press was having their records seized without the Associated Press's knowledge. And to that extent, the White House needs to let us know, for their own sake, as soon as possible, if the President in fact did know that those phone records were seized. And we need to know when he learned about it.
Well, Joe, it raises the obvious issue, and it's certainly not nitpicking by the media to raise this issue, that if the Attorney General indicates that American lives were at risk and this was a critical element of national security, then the President ought to have been informed. So
exactly.
We ought to find that out. But Kelly, on another score, underpinning all of this, with criticism now being directed at the White House, at the presidency, from both sides, from the Republicans and the Democrats, it leads to the question that the President of the United States has been almost purposely disengaged, in a sense, from cultivating relationships within the Congress. So at this point, do you get a sense that the President of the United States is literally operating here with no net?
Well, that's an interesting way to describe it, because he has not built the sort of relationships based on both Democrats and Republicans that we talked to. Even recently, after playing golf and dining, and those things are important parts of building relationships. They're not trivial things. We're still told that there is a distance. I will say that Jay Carney was asked this question, and he said that the President was not aware of this because it was an ongoing investigation, and that it would not be appropriate for the White House to have any involvement in an ongoing investigation. So with respect to the leaks the wiretap, not wiretap, but the records gathering, all of that. Jay Carney tried to put a lot of distance between the president and the Justice Department on that. Part of what typically also happens here is that when a news organization has information at this level, there is cooperation because they are seeking some comment from the government, so they inform the government they have this information, and that's where you heard the discussion of the AP holding this story for some period of time, and that's often a negotiated thing in White Houses that are both Democrat and Republican. And then typically, if the Justice Department wants records, it notifies the news organization in advance. So part of what is so striking about this is, as far as we understand, the AP was given no warning, and the scope of the record search is so much broader than typically would happen when there's an investigation, and that's part of what has jolted the journalism community. No chance to have forewarning and the breadth of what they're looking at.
Andy,